Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into a room few people ever talk about, not because it's hidden, but because it was always too quiet to hear. We're talking about royal women promised in marriage. You'd think it's all diamonds and gold threads, but here's the paradox. Their lives looked dazzling and felt like slow suffocation. You don't see the silk-lined cage unless you touch the bars with your own hands. And tonight, you will. You'll wake up in another century. And the first thing you'll learn is this: being born noble isn't lucky. It's strategic. You're not raised to live. You're raised to be useful. And you probably won't survive this not the way they expect you to. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and what time it is for you in the comments. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before sunrise because your chambermaid does. Her fingers are cold when she smooths your sheets, and you pretend not to notice because you're not supposed to notice servants. You lie in a canopy bed trimmed with embroidery older than you are, in a castle that groans when the wind moves through its bones. The sheets smell like lavender and starch, and you're not sure which scent you hate more. You've never chosen your linens. You've never chosen breakfast. You've never chosen anything that wasn't already decided 3 rooms away. Your first thought is not what to wear, but what you're supposed to be. Because even at age 10, or was it 11, you already know you are a piece of property. A living petition signed in blood and sealed in silk. Down the corridor, your mother is speaking softly but urgently to a man in red velvet who carries scrolls and smells like court politics. You don't need to hear them to know they're discussing you. You've overheard enough late-night conversations to piece together the puzzle: your dowry, your future kingdom, your groom's compromised legitimacy, whatever that means. You are ribbon-binding countries together. Historians still argue whether noble daughters had any influence on foreign policy, or were just decorative metaphors for peace. You already know you are peace, not the kind that comes with calm, but the kind that comes after conquest. Your hair is brushed until your scalp stings. Your shoes are selected to match your future, not your taste. Because taste, darling, is a luxury you don't own. You sit through lessons that teach you how to nod at the right moments, how to look humble without looking weak, how to smile in 3 different ways: respectful, amused, and vaguely superior. These aren't expressions, they're currencies. Your tutor, a thin man with watery eyes, corrects your Latin and your posture with equal severity. He calls it preparing you for court. You call it the slow erasure of your actual self. They don't want you to be intelligent, just intelligent enough. Just enough to look good on paper, not so much that you're accused of ambition. Remember, ambition in a girl is a flaw until it becomes a threat. Then it's treason. Your little sister once asked you why you never run in the garden anymore. You told her that princesses don't run. What you didn't tell her is that your ankles were tied the moment you got your first pair of real shoes stiff. Beautiful things made for standing still. You learned to walk like a letter sealed in wax. Slow and careful. Never rushed. Because girls who run get bruised. And bruises are difficult to explain in court circles where the only acceptable wounds are invisible ones. Somewhere in your chambers is a portrait of your betrothed. You haven't looked at it in weeks. He has pale eyes and the kind of smile you practice in mirrors. You know he's 15 years older, maybe more. His signature arrives on letters before you do. And everyone tells you he's a fine match. You repeat the phrase like a prayer you don't understand. At dinner, you eat in silence while your father's advisors discuss grain exports and the rising cost of silver thread embroidery. One of them glances your way and says, "She'll do fine." You smile, not because you feel fine, but because you've been taught that your smile is your weapon, not a sword, but a sheath. And they never check to see if there's anything sharp inside. You excuse yourself early and walk past a tapestry of your great-great-aunt, who also did fine. She died at 22, still technically a virgin, thanks to a prolonged annulment. They say her portrait moved once, that her eyes shifted when no one was looking. You believe it. In the chapel, you kneel and whisper the same prayer you've said since you could form sentences. It starts with, "Please don't let him be cruel," and ends with, "Please let me vanish without scandal." The priest tells you God watches over royal brides with special care. You suspect he has other things to do. You light a candle anyway, more for the flicker than the faith. The flicker feels like something real, something alive, and for a moment, you pretend you're just a girl and not an agreement between kingdoms. When you go to bed, the moonlight cuts your room into slices of silver and shadow. You lie on your side, hands folded beneath your chin, like you're already being carved onto a tomb. The silence is not peaceful, it's expectant. It waits for you to crack, but you don't. You're the daughter of 5 generations of survival masquerading as nobility. You close your eyes and dream of open windows and unlocked doors. They say you were born lucky, wrapped in ermine and destiny. But you know the truth. You were born useful, and usefulness comes with a price: soft hands, hard bargains. Somewhere in the next room, someone is writing a letter with your name at the top and a kingdom at the bottom. Tomorrow you'll learn who your groom really is. But tonight, you sleep with the knowledge that no matter what he looks like, he will not be yours. He will be the crown's, and so will you. You don't cry when they tell you. That would be a waste of tears in a place where no one drinks from wells, they only sip from crystal. You're told your betrothed is noble, respectable, of good character, which is court code for he's politically stable and doesn't drool. You nod the way you were taught gracefully, eyes downcast, the way a parchment folds. Later, when you're alone, you stare at the dress they lay out for you and wonder how something so soft can feel so heavy. It's your first formal gown, meant for a court presentation, and it takes 3 women to fasten the hooks. It smells like perfume you didn't choose, and when you breathe in, it clings to your throat like obligation. You don't recognize yourself in the mirror. You see a silhouette constructed to be palatable. The neckline is lower than you prefer, but apparently higher than the last ambassador's mistress. That's the standard now, somewhere between discretion and allure. You practice your curtsy 3 more times and don't dare to wobble. If you stumble in this gown, you might not be offered again. You enter the hall like a wrapped gift. Everyone watches you, but no one sees you. That's the trick. You're always looked at, never looked into. Historians still debate whether these ceremonial unveilings were empowering or humiliating. You know the answer, but you're not the one writing books. The court's gaze is a wall of eyes that measure your worth in posture and waistline. You remember the older ladies whispering about your mother's childbearing hips and wonder what your own body will be reduced to. You walk across the floor, feeling every seam in your bodice like a rope pulling you forward. The fan in your hand trembles slightly, so you smile wider. That's what you've been taught to do. Smile when the seams strain. They introduce you not by your name, but by your lineage, your house, your father's titles. It takes longer to list those than to say what you like for breakfast. Not that anyone's asked. A boy near your age glances at you and then away. He's not your groom, just another future political hostage with polished boots and eyes that dart like they're trying to escape his skull. You exchange the same look people give passing ships recognition without rescue. At the banquet table, you sit still for so long, your feet go numb. You're not permitted to eat until the Duchess on your left raises her fork, and even then, only small bites. One of the older women comments that you have your grandmother's chin. You didn't know chins were inheritable diplomacy, but apparently they are. Later, a musician plays a song composed for your engagement. It's lovely in the way cages are when sunlight hits the bars just right. You nod in rhythm, pretending it doesn't sound like mourning in disguise. The chorus repeats your betrothed's name 3 times. You forget your own. You're supposed to toast to his health, so you lift your glass and say the words. Your voice feels like it belongs to a character you're playing. Your lips taste of watered wine and trapped futures. You wonder if he's listening in some other palace, sipping his own vintage, asking a servant to remind him how old you are. You're 12. He's 32. But no one gasps. This is not scandal. It's arithmetic. They begin preparing your dowry the next day. You are handed a list of what will be sent with you: trunks of linen, silver spoons, 3 horses, 2 chaperones, and 1 prayer book embroidered with your initials. The book isn't yours. It's been used by 5 brides before you. Each one added her own ribbon. You run your fingers over the worn spine and wonder how many fingers did the same. One of the names embroidered in gold belongs to a girl who died in childbirth before her 15th birthday. They say she didn't scream. You wonder if that makes her brave or just well-trained. Your lessons change after the announcement. No more arithmetic or Latin poetry. Now it's etiquette, table placement, the correct angle to hold a goblet. You practice how to entertain a foreign court, how to compliment a queen without sounding envious, how to disappear just enough to remain liked but not remembered. Your instructor corrects your posture with a fan tap to the spine and says, "You are the wind, not the flame. You must move around the fire, never through it." You don't tell her that wind can destroy palaces if it tries hard enough. You swallow that thought, like you swallow everything else. In the afternoons, your mother rehearses the wedding procession with you. Every step is timed to organ chords and flower petals. You walk beside her, mirroring her grace like a shadow learning to cast itself. She tells you stories about her own wedding, how her veil was too tight and her smile too wide. You ask her if she ever loved your father. She doesn't answer. Just adjusts your sleeve and says, "Duty is a kind of love." You nod, because what else can you do? The air smells of old stone and polished floors. You're not sure where the scent of freedom went, or if it ever existed. You begin to notice small things you never did before, how your laughter is monitored, how your appetite is watched, how your personal maid now reports to your governess instead of you. Even your letters are copied before being sent. You sign them with flourishes that aren't yours. You're told it's time to stop using pet names and childish endings. No more yours always. Just in faithful service. You don't cry when you write them. Crying would smudge the ink. Instead, you press violets between the pages and pretend it's sentiment instead of resistance. At night, you lie awake and imagine other lives. One where you fall in love with a stable boy and run off during a storm. One where you study astronomy in a quiet tower. One where you never have to wear a dress so tight it leaves red lines across your ribs. But those are stories for the kitchen girls. Not for you. You're told dreams are dangerous. You believe them. But that doesn't stop you from having them. You dream of running barefoot across wet grass, of biting into a pear and not caring if it drips, of someone asking, "What do you want?" and waiting for your answer. In the morning, they fit you for another gown. This one is for the betrothal portrait. The artist is polite, but his eyes are not kind. He asks you to tilt your chin just so, to soften your gaze, to look like a bride. You ask him what that means. He says, "Look as if you were born for someone else." You do, and he paints. You wonder if history will remember your face or just the arrangement of the pearls on your bodice. The gown fits, but does the days bleed into each other, each one stitched with ritual and repetition. And by now, you've learned that silence is your most valuable language, not because you have nothing to say, but because everyone already thinks they know what you mean. You rise before the sun, not because you want to, but because wanting isn't part of your vocabulary anymore. Your governess begins your daily routine with a nod and a look that says, "No errors today." You've memorized the sequence bathe, braid, bind, bow, breathe barely. You move like parchment being folded, perfectly pressed and never loud. Your governess reads your journal when you're not looking. She doesn't tell you she does it, but you can always tell when your ink is slightly smudged, or when a page is folded back, not the way you left it. You stop writing thoughts and begin writing lessons instead. A good wife does not question the ceremony. A princess does not interrupt the bishop. A girl's beauty is her silence made visible. You underline that one. Your voice is trained the way your spine was straight, narrow, and bendable when needed. You're told to speak clearly, but never passionately. To speak precisely, but never too often. You once laughed too loudly at a joke made by a visiting duke, and for 3 days afterward, your tutors kept reminding you that dignity should never flirt. Historians still argue whether noble girls of your era had any true education beyond court manners. But here's the truth, your entire body is being educated into silence. Your gestures, your sighs, your steps on cold stone, even the way you blink when asked to endure something unpleasant. This is your syllabus. This is your training. You are not meant to argue. You are meant to endure with polish. There's an embroidery hoop in your hands every afternoon. You stitch and stitch until your fingers blister, then callous, then blister again. But the pain is mild and useful. It distracts from the ache in your ribs from corset practice, and from the headache that never really leaves now that your marriage is less a plan and more a deadline. One day, the thread snaps mid-stitch. and for a moment, the break startles you. The maid beside you jumps to help, but you shake your head. You don't say anything. You simply knot the thread again and continue. That's the expected thing to do, the smart thing, but inside, you feel like the thread isn't the only thing breaking. A visiting queen stops by your household for a brief tour. She's old, dressed in layers of black silk, her eyes like cracked mirrors. She studies you for less than a minute and says, she'll last if she learns not to look for kindness. You're not sure if it's a warning or a compliment. After she leaves, your mother tells you not to take such comments to heart. She had a hard life, she whispers, as if that were a rare condition. You wonder how many women at court would describe their lives as soft. Probably none. You're taken to observe court proceedings more often now. You sit behind a screen where you're not visible to the guests, but can see everything: diplomats arguing, nobles fanning themselves, scribes scribbling like their ink might run out. You notice that the women rarely speak unless addressed directly, and even then, their words are like lace decorative, expected, and mostly see-through. You mimic them, practice the subtle nod, the polite deferment, the composed discomfort when interrupted. Your favorite court lady has a habit of clenching her fan handle until her knuckles whiten. It's her rebellion. It's almost invisible, but you notice, and you copy it. Once a week, you're taken to the gardens and reminded to smile for passersby. You sit among roses and pretend you're relaxed. But the roses have thorns, and you have none. At least not one's visible. A little girl skips past with her nursemaid, giggling freely. You look away quickly, as if joy might be contagious and you're no longer allowed to be infected. You press your hand to your lap and smooth your gown. Then you smile. Always smile. One of the nobles compliments your posture. You say thank you and think about how you haven't slouched in 5 years. Your bedchamber becomes quieter the closer your wedding approaches. People speak to you more softly, like you're being embalmed. Your childhood books disappear. Your dolls vanish overnight, and you don't ask where they went. You just wake up to find your writing desk replaced with a gilded vanity, and your world becomes smaller even as your responsibilities grow heavier. One of the maids accidentally leaves a pin in your bodice during a fitting. It stabs you just above the hip. You say nothing. Bleed quietly. A noble woman notices the stain and praises your poise under pressure. You wonder if she would say the same if the pin had gone deeper. They begin calling you Lady Bride, not by your name. Your name has become a ghost that drifts behind titles. You catch your reflection in the mirror and try saying your full name aloud, but it sounds wrong. Like trying to wear shoes you outgrew years ago. Your identity now belongs to 2 houses, 3 contracts, and an entire council of men who use phrases like marital alliance and succession security. You used to write poems in the margins of your copybooks. Now you write signatures, one on a prayer book, one on a thank you letter to your future mother-in-law, one on a ceremonial guest list. They all look the same, a loop of ink that curls like a locked door. And then there are the rehearsals. Wedding etiquette is not merely a list, it's a choreography. You walk with your head held precisely 13 degrees above neutral gaze. You kneel without letting your dress wrinkle. You speak a vow in the tongue of your husband's country, even though you don't know what half the words mean. Your teacher assures you they mean beautiful things. You wonder if she knows, or if she's lying kindly. You're told to learn these phrases by heart. I pledge myself to the house of, I offer my body and my obedience. I vow to uphold his honor above mine. You repeat them with a voice so smooth it could be mistaken for belief. You see less of your father now. When you do, he kisses your forehead like he's blessing a letter he's about to send off. You almost ask him to delay the marriage, just by a year. But the words stop in your throat, not because you fear his answer, but because you already know it. You smile instead, the safe kind. He smiles back. His eyes don't reach yours. You realize you're already a memory to him. Something negotiated, sealed, soon to be shipped. One afternoon, you stumble in your heels while practicing the bow to the archbishop. You land hard. Everyone gasps, but you don't cry. You laugh, quietly, then louder, and for a full 5 seconds, you laugh like a child who forgot she was royalty. Everyone freezes. Your governess pulls you aside. Dignity, she hisses, is not a joke. You apologize, but you feel something stir inside you. Something not yet named. Something warm and sharp and dangerous. That night, you write your name in the condensation on the window. Just once. Just to see if you still can. They bring out the dowry chest like it's a coffin dressed for a party, gilded edges, silk-lined drawers, locks polished to a mirror shine. You're not allowed to touch it. You only watch. One lady unfolds bolt after bolt of fabric in front of you: damask, velvet, brocade, linen spun so fine it floats when held up to candlelight. None of it feels like it belongs to you. And, technically, none of it does. Your body might be crossing the border, but it's these textiles, these golden buckles, these parcels of silver and ivory that make you welcome. You're just the creature that arrives with the real gifts. A dowry is not a favor, it's a payment, and you are the receipt. They start weighing the silver plates, not counting, weighing, coins too, all in rows, stacked beside your wedding slippers. The embroidery on the slippers was finished yesterday, vines twined around your future husband's initials. You ask where your initials are. The seamstress blinks slowly and says, "They're in the hem." You don't ask why. You already know. The court almoner blesses the chest. His fingers shake when he makes the sign of the cross. And for a second you wonder if he's seen too many girls like you, young, well packaged, and quietly terrified. He tells you that generosity is holy. You wonder what's holy about being measured in livestock equivalents. They tally your worth against how many estates he controls. 1 cow for each curtain, 5 acres for the necklace. Historians still argue whether these dowry practices were a tool of control or simply tradition. You think the answer is both. The dress you're wearing today is pale gold, with pearls down the sleeves and a bodice so tight you can't sigh without consequence. You're not allowed to sneeze in this dress, or speak with food in your teeth, or raise your voice above a murmur, unless you want to be called difficult. You're offered a mirror, not to admire yourself, but to memorize how to pose with the dowry items behind you. This is for the official painter. You must look prosperous but modest, beautiful but not vain, tall but not taller than your groom. You don't yet know how tall he is. You've only seen the sketch, a jawline sketched in charcoal, eyes that look away. Your mother assures you he's healthy. That's what matters. She says it with a tone people use when they mean, that's all you're going to get. So, accept it. A page brings in more brooches. They're placed in a row like soldiers waiting for orders. Each one has a little tag. Not your name, but a number. You're told this is for inventory purposes. You try not to laugh. You feel like you're being inventoried too. The dressmaker mutters something about womb placement while adjusting the waistline. You pretend you don't hear her, but you do. Everything is about the womb now. The air machine. The oven of dynasties. Your midsection is not a belly anymore. It's a cradle they're trying to perfect with stitching and symbolism. You are to eat the right fruits, walk just enough, but never too much. No more horseback, no more dancing for joy. Dancing, they say, displaces things. You ask, what things? They don't answer. Just press another pomegranate into your hand. Later, in your journal, you sketch a pear with a crown on top and write beneath it, my uterus, the kingdom. Your future father-in-law sends a letter thanking your family for the generosity. He refers to you not by name, but as the honorable bride of our house's next sunrise. You're not sure if it's poetic or just creepy. You ask your tutor if it's normal to be addressed like a weather pattern. He says yes. You say nothing. You've been practicing silence so long, it's second nature now. Like holding your breath when you pass judgment, or smiling when you want to scream. Your cousin visits and says your portraits look angelic. You want to ask her if angels ever get tired, but she's already halfway through her story about a bishop's son who tried to kiss her during a blessing. You listen, you nod, you do not interrupt. At dinner, a minor noble asks you what you're most excited about in your marriage. You stare at your soup, you say, peace between our families. He chuckles and says, not the wedding night. You tighten your grip on the spoon, not enough to be noticed, but enough to keep your blood from freezing. You smile. Oh, you say, that too. A lady across the table raises her brows slightly in approval. She's the one who used to be mistress to the old king. Now she teaches table manners. Funny how roles change. You eat slowly and don't taste anything. That night, you're brought a parchment to sign. It's the official dowry ledger. You trace your finger along the words in good health, unburdened by scandal, in agreement with all sacred rights. You wonder what would happen if you wrote in a correction. In agreement? Yes, but only because I wasn't asked. You sign it anyway. That's what good daughters do. The ink dries faster than your resolve. You stare out the window and watch snow fall like it's trying to blanket the truth. You think about the girl across the sea who will be unpacking your chest. You wonder if she's practicing the same curtsy. If her bedchamber smells like fear and jasmine too. The next morning, your nursemaid gently informs you that your trousseau is complete. You nod. You say thank you. You stare at the trunk and imagine locking yourself inside it instead. You tell yourself not to think that way. You try to remember a happy thought, but all you can summon is a memory of the kitchen girl slipping you a sugared plum last winter when you cried during Latin declension. You cried quietly, the way girls are supposed to. You wonder where that kitchen girl is now. Probably married to someone she chose. Probably poor. Probably laughing. Your mother comes in while you're being brushed for sleep. She kisses your temple and murmurs, "He'll be kind." You want to ask her how she knows, but that would break the spell. The ritual of reassurance is part of the costume now. Everyone rehearses their lines. She doesn't stay long, just long enough to remind you that good marriages are built on patience. You lie back against your pillow and stare at the canopy. It's covered in gold thread vines, but they look more like shackles when viewed upside down. You whisper to no one, "I am more than a price." But even as you say it, you know the dowry chest says otherwise. In the middle of the night, you wake from a dream where your gown had teeth and the pearls whispered numbers in your ear. You sit up, sweating, breath caught. The moonlight turns your chamber silver. You rise and walk to the chest. You open the lid. The scent of cedar and pressed velvet floods out. You press your hand against a folded gown and suddenly feel very small, very contained. You whisper your own name 3 times, just to see if it still responds. The chest doesn't answer, but your heart does, quietly, a steady beat. You're 12 when they tell you the wedding date has been set, and 32 is the number they say, with his name, your groom, your match, your pending husband, the man with the ash-colored eyes and the ink-black signature. He's far away, in a land where the hills are sharper and the language softer but filled with traps. You hear that he enjoys falconry and theological debates. You enjoy fig tarts and stories with dragons. You are not a match. You are a solution. The first time you meet him, he does not say your name. He says, "She's lovely," to your father, not to you, as though you are a painting nailed to a gallery wall. You curtsy, trained to the bone, but your knees feel like they belong to someone else. He's dressed in navy with golden trim, and his beard is too sharp for kindness. He offers you a gift, a pearl comb you're told to treasure. You do not know if it's beautiful or just expected. You thank him anyway, because that's your job now, to smooth over every awkwardness, every age gap, every secret history. At dinner, you're seated beside him, but he speaks to your father more than to you. When he does glance your way, it's the kind of look someone gives an instrument they haven't yet learned how to play. You pretend not to notice. You chew your bread quietly. You don't ask why his fingers tremble slightly when he drinks, or why he stares so long at the hearth when he thinks no one is watching. Historians still argue whether such marriages were contracts or performances. You're starting to think they were both, and the roles were assigned long before the curtain even rose. He tells a story about a hunting dog that bit him when he was a boy. You smile politely. You want to ask if the dog was ever forgiven. You don't. He doesn't ask you anything in return. You're escorted to your chamber later that night and told you did well. You don't know what well means anymore. You wonder if it means still silent, smile-shaped. You sit at your vanity and remove the earrings that pinched your lobes raw. The comb lies on the dresser, staring at you like a verdict. You pick it up and press it to your palm. It's cool, heavy, sharp at the teeth. You wonder what else he'll give you that looks beautiful. but cuts when held too long. In the days that follow, he visits again and again, each time more formal. He never touches you beyond a kiss on the knuckles, delivered like a footnote. You are shown off at court feasts and garden walks. See the bride, they whisper, so composed. You overhear someone say he is lucky to have you. You want to ask what luck feels like? The tutor reminds you to speak with dignity. You practice phrases in his native tongue, not poetry, but phrases like, "Shall I fetch the priest?" and "I am honored to serve." There is no word for choice in the vocabulary list. One evening, he brings his sister to meet you. She watches you like she's reading a book she's already memorized. She's older than him, sharper, too. When he steps away, she leans in and says, "He prefers obedience to affection. Learn that quickly." You blink, nod. She straightens your collar before walking off. You're not surprised, only mildly disappointed that no one even tries to pretend otherwise. The bishop blesses the union in a formal letter, calling it a merging of lands and spirits. You think my spirit wasn't consulted. You are summoned for gown fittings again. This time, for the ceremony itself. Your dress is white, though in your region, blue is still traditional. They say white represents purity. You think it represents erasure? The sleeves are embroidered with doves and interlocking rings. The symbolism is so loud, it drowns out your thoughts. The seamstress hums as she pricks her fingers and tightens your waist. "He'll love this one," she says. You wonder how many girls she's said that to. The night before the ceremony, they take you through a silent ritual, a bath with rose oil and herbs. You're told not to speak. Just listen. You obey. A maid combs your hair and tells you a story about a princess who married a king and fell in love later. "It happens," she says gently. You nod. It might, but the weight of certainty and the softness of hope sit unequally on your chest. When the bathwater drains, you watch it swirl away and think this is what girlhood looks like when it leaves. You don't sleep that night. You lie awake, counting heartbeats and ceiling beams. Morning arrives like a punishment. You are dressed and veiled before the sun can rise fully. The mirror is covered. They say the bride must not see herself, only be seen. The chapel smells of wax and expectation. Flowers line the aisle, trembling in the breeze. You do not tremble, not outwardly. You walk slowly, as practiced, as prepared, as priced. He waits at the altar like a man arriving to collect a shipment. He smiles. You bow your head. The ceremony is long, too long. The words echo like hymns written for someone else. You say your vows with clarity. His hand is warm and dry when it touches yours. He does not squeeze, he just holds, as if holding is all that's needed. The kiss is ceremonial. No more, no less. You hear applause and wonder who exactly is cheering. You don't look back. Brides aren't supposed to. You step forward into the future, heavy with lace and hollow with silence. At the feast, you are placed beside him again. This time, your bodies are closer. He drinks more than you expected. He speaks little. When he does, it's to compliment your father or his own wine. He does not ask you how you feel. You don't ask him if he's nervous. You cut your meat into perfect squares and eat with precision. The hall spins with laughter, dancing, blessings. You feel like a mannequin at the center of a music box, pretty, still, turned by someone else's hand. When the time comes to retire, you are led through corridors lined with candles and petals. A lady whispers, "Be calm, be obedient." You nod. You nod so much these days your neck aches. In the bridal chamber, he's already waiting, sitting, cloak removed. He stands when you enter. You don't move quickly. You don't move slowly. You move the way water fills a cup shapeless, but filling. He speaks. You've been brave. It's the first sentence he said that feels almost like a kindness. You thank him. He says, "We will learn this together." You nod again. You do not know what this is, but you say, "Yes," because that is the word written into your skin now. And when he finally reaches out, not for your hand, but to brush a hair from your cheek, you do not flinch. But you do not breathe either. By morning, your body has learned to be a room someone else visited, You rise not from rest, but from arrangement, your limbs gathered back into yourself like scattered objects, politely swept away after guests leave. He is gone already, summoned to a council meeting, or perhaps he simply preferred not to linger. You are alone in a bed that still smells like roses, and you wonder if anyone will ask how you feel. No one does. The chambermaids enter with warm water and a tray of sweetened tea, their eyes lowered, their movements rehearsed. One of them places a folded cloth gently on your chair. It's embroidered with the crest of your new house. She says nothing. You're supposed to feel married now, but what you feel is watched. Even in silence, you are a public event. You remember a story whispered once by your old nursemaid that some brides fainted on their wedding night from fear, or wine, or simply not being able to breathe inside their gowns. You envy them, their escape was brief, dramatic, and accepted. Yours is subtle. You just float. You're told the court is pleased, that you presented yourself well, as if you were a stage or a performance space, not a person. He sends you a brooch, emerald and pearl. You pin it on and try to feel proud. You don't. The days that follow feel blurred. You wake, you eat, you smile. Your new ladies in waiting follow you everywhere like well-dressed shadows. You learn their names quickly because forgetting would be insulting, and then just as quickly forget their faces in the swirl of daily routine. One of them tells you the Queen Mother will be visiting soon. She's fond of discreet brides, the girl warns, but not of arrogance. You nod. You wonder how many girls she's warned before. You wonder how many obeyed. You begin lessons in your new country's customs. Not just the language, though, you practice that, too, but in the unspoken rhythms of hierarchy. Who you must greet first, who is secretly powerful, even if their titles suggest otherwise, which nobles despise each other, which servants are spies, which rooms have mirrors that don't reflect just once. The court is a maze where every corridor leads not to an answer, but to another question. You are watched constantly. Your meals are counted, your facial expressions assessed. You're expected to favor certain foods, certain colors, certain phrases, depending on which diplomat is in the room. You once giggle at a servant's mistake, just a slip of the tongue, and are pulled aside later. Smiling at incompetence suggests weakness. You apologize. You never smile at accidents again. Historians still argue whether royal brides in foreign courts wielded influence behind the scenes, or were merely ornamental. You begin to suspect you are both, a moving statue carved to nod at dinners and whisper at wakes. You find yourself saying thank you to people who ignore you. You compliment tapestries you hate and tolerate musicians who perform songs you can't follow. Your husband sits beside you during court gatherings, but rarely speaks to you unless prompted. He's not cruel, just absent, like a portrait present, but two-dimensional. You try to tell yourself that this is better than violence. That absence is a kind of mercy, but mercy is cold when there's no warmth to follow it. You begin attending chapel services twice as often, not out of piety, but because it is the one place you are allowed to sit in silence without being questioned. You kneel, you bow, you fold your hands like parchment. The incense stings your eyes, but you welcome the sting. It reminds you that sensation still exists. You watch the candles burn slowly and think about wax, how it holds its shape until the flame tells it to forget. You wonder how many women melted without anyone noticing. One evening, you're summoned to a private dinner with your husband. Just the two of you. The table is long and unnecessarily adorned, but the food is warm and the wine softer than usual. He speaks more than he ever has. He asks you what your favorite season is. You blink. It feels like someone knocked on a long-forgotten door. You say, autumn. He nods. He says he prefers winter. You both eat in silence after that. It isn't romantic, but it isn't empty, either. It's just two people breathing in the same room. He doesn't ask more. He doesn't have to. You realize then that this is what connection might look like. Here, threadbare, brief, unspoken. Later that night, in your chamber, you write the word autumn over and over again in your journal until the ink begins to blur. You underline it, you circle it, you draw a leaf beside it and imagine it falling from a tree without anyone trying to catch it. The next day, you are told to attend a public event, a procession to commemorate your marriage. You wear a cloak so heavy you feel like a statue being rolled down the street. The people cheer, they wave, you wave back. A child throws petals at your feet. You thank him, he doesn't hear you. You return to the palace to find a new harp in your chamber. A gift, someone says. You try to play, though your fingers are stiff. The strings bite at first, but then you remember how to soften your touch. You play a slow melody your old music tutor once hummed when he thought you weren't listening. A lullaby in a language older than your house. One of your maids lingers in the doorway and smiles faintly. You stop. The song wasn't meant to be heard, but it was. You feel embarrassed and oddly alive. In the weeks that follow, you begin to build a routine. You wake before the bells. You walk in the gardens when permitted. You practice saying nothing while conveying everything. You nod at the right people. You weep only when bathing. You learn the secret trick of tucking dried herbs into your pillow to sleep better. Your ladies notice. They copy you. You don't mind. It feels like a quiet kind of leadership. A rebellion of rosemary. You're told to start accompanying your husband during certain state appearances. You do. You smile beside him as he signs papers you're not allowed to read. You nod as nobles discuss politics you're expected to pretend you understand. Sometimes he glances at you. Sometimes you glance back. Once, you catch him staring not at your face, but at your hands. You clench them slightly. He looks away. One afternoon, a foreign emissary addresses you directly. He praises your decorum, says your posture reminds him of his queen. You say, then she must have excellent training. He laughs. Your husband does not. That night, he asks you not to speak out of turn in future audiences. You nod. Later, you think of the harp. You think of autumn. You didn't write anything that night. There are moments that are almost soft and unexpected compliment from a chamberlain. A flower left on your seat by someone anonymous. A page in a prayer book where the corner is folded just as you like. These fragments begin to feel like a secret necklace you string together in your mind. Nothing grand. Just small things that say you are still here. And that becomes your truth. You are still here, composed, contained, promised, performed, but still here. You're no longer the guest of honor in this court. You are the proof of peace. The signatures are dry, the treaties have been filed, and the dowry has long since been unpacked, divided, and silently praised. Now, you move through the palace not like a bride, but like furniture elegant, in place, useful when spoken to. The days lose their names. Morning arrives with a knock. The same breakfast, the same veil, the same walk to the same chair in the same chamber where you embroider symbols you barely believe in. You're no longer asked how you feel, only how the marriage appears. Is he treating you well means, are we avoiding scandal? Are you content means, are you causing any disruption? You are trained to recognize these translations. The court smiles when you smile, so you do. You perform that expression the way you were taught to recite scripture wordlessly, with reverence for what might happen if you hesitate. A banquet is arranged in your honor, not for you don't be silly, but for your value. You are seated beside a cousin of your husband who's known for liking his wine more than his wit. He leans in too close and asks if the little dove has started laying eggs yet. You laugh politely, then you excuse yourself, not because you're offended, but because you've learned that too much grace invites cruelty. In the hall outside, a maid offers you a cloth soaked in lavender water for your nerves. "Milady," she says. You take it and thank her. She walks away, and you wonder if she noticed your hands trembling. Later, you mention the cousin's comment to your husband. He sighs and says, "He meant no harm." That phrase becomes a refrain. The next time someone stares too long at your neckline, the next time a court poet writes a satire about foreign brides who speak too softly, the next time your suggestion at a charity meeting is ignored and then repeated by someone louder, they mean no harm. But harm, you realize, doesn't need to mean, it just needs to repeat. Your mother-in-law begins visiting you more frequently now. She glides into your chambers unannounced, always preceded by the scent of myrrh and judgment. She offers advice, rarely asked for, but impossible to refuse. You should wear your hair lower, it flatters humility. Don't look him in the eyes too often, it unsettles him. Learn to be agreeable without being too familiar. She sits by the fire, stroking her gloves like they're small animals. You listen, you nod, you file it all away. The way you file away the realization that she smiles only when she corrects you. One afternoon, during a court celebration, you are asked to join a dance. You hesitate. You haven't danced since your wedding, where every step was choreographed and memorized like scripture. But the crowd is watching. The music swells. So, you do. You place your hand in your husband's, and you move like a swan stitched into a tapestry, elegant, if slightly unreal. You can feel eyes on you, some hopeful, some calculating, some just waiting for your heel to catch on the rug. But it doesn't. You don't fall. You float. And then, the next morning, it begins. Whispers in the corridors. She's adjusting beautifully. She's finding her place. She's a proper lady now. You wonder what that means. What you were before. Whether this new version of you is real, or just more convincing. Historians still debate whether these women had internal lives or merely reflected the lives expected of them. You know the answer, but it's buried in 1,000 moments. No one will ever record like how you've started drinking your tea without sugar, just to feel one less thing taste sweet. You visit the nursery wing sometimes. Not for your own children, you have none yet, but to maintain appearances. The Duchess who oversees the orphanage fund likes you. You nod when she speaks of numbers and policies, of God's mercy and public reputation. You sit among the cribs and run your fingers over the edge of a wooden cradle carved with the emblem of the court. One child grabs your finger and smiles. You smile back, but it's not the same one you give to nobles. It's real, and it hurts. That night, you find yourself unable to sleep. You walk the hall barefoot, your skirts brushing cold stone, and stand in front of the chapel doors. You don't go inside. You just stare at the ironwork and imagine what silence feels like when no one is listening. You ask your husband one evening whether you might study again. Something small, astronomy, or languages. Something to fill the endless echo between your obligations. He says, if you must. That's more generous than most answers you've heard. So, you begin. A tutor is summoned. Discreet, middle-aged, kind in a distracted way. He brings books with pressed flowers in the margins. You read them carefully, taking notes in ink the color of dried blood. You tell yourself it's a private ritual. Knowledge as resistance, letters as rebellion. Your husband leaves for a hunt in the north. He's gone for 11 days. During that time, you are seen but not spoken to. The court moves around you like a machine that's already calibrated. You attend the banquets. You sit in the front row during religious observances. You smile when children sing and nod when nobles bicker. You write letters home and receive no replies. You write them anyway. On the 12th day, he returns with a silver fox pelt and no injuries. That, apparently, is good fortune. Your chambermaid asks, softly, if you missed him. You pause. Then you say, he missed nothing. She doesn't respond. Just brushes your hair like it's made of fragile promises. You ask her to braid it tight. She does. You feel the pull at your scalp. And for once, it feels like something true. Your wardrobe begins to change. You're expected now to wear deeper colors, more jewels, heavier fabrics. You become a walking symbol of fertility and formality. Gone are the pale blues and soft silks. In their place, crimson, gold, velvet, brocade. You're told it flatters your new role. You smile. You whisper to yourself, I didn't know roles could be tailored. The hem of one gown weighs nearly as much as your dog. You walk slowly. You learn not to trip. One morning, as you sit at the window embroidering a phoenix onto a handkerchief, a dove lands on the sill. It coos. It tilts its head. You freeze. You stare at it. Then slowly extend your finger. It doesn't flee. It steps onto your hand. Your maid gasps. It's a sign. She whispers. You don't ask of what. You just hold it there for a moment longer than you're supposed to. Then, quietly, you let it go. You are learning not to want too much. Not because you have no desires, but because you now know how quietly they must be buried to stay alive. The gowns fit, the manners work, the smiles land. But underneath it all, you still sometimes write your name in the steam of your wash basin mirror, just to see it disappear. You've stopped asking whether anyone notices. You've started hoping they never do. You are a gift, not a guest, and gifts are only unwrapped when needed. The marriage bed is not just a piece of furniture, it's a throne with no crown, a theater with no applause. Every thread on the sheets is ceremonial, chosen not for comfort, but for meaning. The first night was meant to confirm the alliance. The following nights are meant to fulfill it. But now, weeks, months have passed, and the bed grows colder by the night. He lies beside you sometimes, breathing evenly, hands folded like he's waiting for something. Sometimes, he does not come at all. You stop waiting. You stop wondering. You simply smooth the coverlet in the morning, just as the maids taught you. The silence between you both becomes furniture, functional, neutral. You learn to be grateful for neutrality, because you've heard worse stories. One lady whose husband insisted she sleep on the floor when she spoke out of turn. Another whose bruises were treated like accessories. One more who failed to conceive and found herself quietly removed to a countryside estate, replaced by her own cousin within weeks. So yes, you decide. Cold is better. Cold is clean. But still, you wonder. You lie there on nights when sleep feels too loud and think about what it would feel like to be touched with curiosity, not just obligation, to be looked at with interest, not inventory. You remember a servant's daughter, once caught kissing a stable hand. You were too young to understand then. You just knew she was sent away. Now you think of her with envy, because she got to choose her ruin. You're not allowed to ruin anything. You are preservation. You are preservation in a corset, trimmed in brocade. Historians still debate whether royal women held emotional power behind closed doors. But emotions, here, are delicate porcelain, displayed, not used. The Queen Dowager hosts a dinner in your honor, not to celebrate you, but to make sure you haven't cracked. She sits at the head of the table like a cold moon, orbiting a dying fire. You smile, you speak, you offer the correct praise for her gown. Exquisite lacework, you say? Though it looks like a tablecloth strangling her throat. She nods. She asks you no questions. Your presence is the answer. You are seated next to a cardinal who smells like ink and judgment. He says, "The court whispers of your composure." You smile and thank him. Like that's something earned instead of enforced. Later, in your chamber, you peel off your gown and feel your ribs exhale. The ladies help you undress. You thank them, though you want to scream. You wonder if they think you're lucky. You wonder if they imagine themselves in your place, wrapped in titles and protocol. You want to tell them the gold scratches, that the jewels pinch, that silence can rot the soul if left in a dark enough box. But instead, you ask one of them to bring you your sewing. You stitch a rose into the corner of a handkerchief and wonder how long it would take for someone to notice if the petals spelled help. There's a feast the next week, another one, always another one. You sit beside your husband and count the courses. 5, then 7, then too many. The musicians play your wedding tune again, slightly out of key. No one notices, or perhaps they're too polite to say. A courtier makes a joke at your expense, something about your country's accents and poetry, and everyone laughs, even your husband, though he looks away quickly. You press your napkin into your lap so tightly that the embroidery leaves an imprint on your skin. You laugh too, after a moment, not because it's funny, but because the alternative is worse. That night, you ask your husband a question, just one. Do you believe people can love each other? Eventually, he looks at you like you've spoken in a tongue he never learned. He says, "Why would that matter?" You nod. You don't ask again. The next day, a new portrait is commissioned yours, alone, in your winter gown. You sit for it 3 mornings in a row. The painter asks you to look serene. You try, but halfway through the second sitting, he asks if you're sad. You blink. No. You say, "Just still." He smiles. He paints. A foreign envoy arrives, bringing gifts and questions. He's younger than you expect, sharp-eyed and unafraid. He bows with flourish. He addresses you directly. He says, "You are lovelier than they said." Your ladies blush on your behalf. You smile the correct smile. But something inside you shifts. Not because you care about compliments, but because it's the first time someone has spoken to you like you exist outside of arrangement. At dinner, he asks you about poetry, not court poetry, but actual verses. You mention one line, you remember the rose that bloomed from nowhere, and he nods. We have one like that too, he says. You never hear it. The conversation moves on, but you remember that sentence for weeks. When he leaves, he sends a small token, a book, no title, just verses inside, in his language, with translations beside. You hide it in your sleeve. You read it at night, by candlelight. The words make no promises, but they ask questions, and that somehow feels more intimate than anything else. The bed remains cold, but now you begin sleeping diagonally, like you're reclaiming the space. You fold the covers back as if preparing for a different version of yourself to arrive. You begin dreaming again, not of escape, not of defiance, just of touch, a hand on your back, not taking, just staying. A voice that calls your name not as property, but as presence. Sometimes you wake with your hands curled to your chest, as if cradling something fragile and invisible. You begin spending time in the old library, the one few people visit. You tell your ladies it's for peace, and it is. The books smell like dust and forgotten thoughts. You open one at random each day. Sometimes it's about plants, sometimes history. Once, you find a volume of letters between queens. One line catches you, I wrote him daily. He answered yearly. I lived in the space between. You copy it into your journal. You write your name beneath it. Then you close the book. One morning, your husband leaves for the borderlands. Some conflict stirring. Not war, not yet. Just enough unrest to require presence. He says goodbye with a nod. You watch his back as he exits. He does not turn around. You stand at the window long after the hooves fade. You think, it's easier this way. But something in your stomach twists. You press a hand to it and say nothing. That evening, you walk barefoot across your chamber. You light no candles. You open the window and let the cold in. You stand there, arms folded, and whisper your own name once, just to see if it sounds like truth or fiction. It doesn't echo, but you feel it. Small, quiet, whole. The ceremony of being a wife continues without the man. You attend functions, read petitions, play music at evening gatherings. You bow at the right names. You smile at the right faces. But now, your smile has become yours. A performance, yes, but also a practice. A craft. You decide where it goes, to whom, how much. One night, you walk to the empty bed and instead lie across the foot of it, like a cat curled at the edge of a storm. You sleep that way, dreaming of nothing. You have not been touched in weeks. But tonight, the sheets feel warm, and no one knows why. The silence grows thicker the longer your husband is gone. Not like the absence of sound, but like the presence of something waiting, watching. In his absence, the palace does not grow quieter. It adjusts, breathes differently. You are still expected to attend events, to respond to letters, to smile on balconies like your joy is a national resource. But now the questions begin to shift. Eyes linger on your midsection longer than before. The court physicians start attending your meals. The palace priest blesses you a little too enthusiastically. And one morning you receive a gift. You didn't ask for a bundle of herbs wrapped in lace with a note that says, for comfort and fertility. You don't recognize the handwriting. You don't ask. You place the bundle in your drawer and close it quietly. In the hallway, whispers begin to move like smoke. Has she conceived yet? Does she even share his bed? Perhaps there is a problem. No one says these things to your face. Of course. They float just behind the tapestry, just outside the chapel, always in voices that vanish when you turn your head. Every month becomes a ritual. The linen is checked. The maids avert their eyes. You pretend not to notice the basin beside the bed, placed there more conspicuously now. You begin to hate the way they look at you when you don't flinch, like your composure is suspicious, as though sadness would redeem you. Historians still debate whether royal women were more scrutinized for infertility or punished for being too calm about it. You're learning that both are true. You sip the herbal tonics they bring. bitter liquids with promises hidden in steam. They taste like hope boiled down to obedience. 1 cup, 2, every morning. You smile when the cup is passed, and you pretend not to gag. That's your skill now, surviving suspicion with grace. The physician asks questions, none of which you can answer. Are your cycles regular? Do you experience pain? Do you feel different? You reply with practiced neutrality. I feel as I always do, which is a lie, but only barely, because you are changing just not in the way they want. You feel your body hardening in strange places, your hands, your back, your mouth when you try to say what you really think, and the words refuse to shape themselves. You imagine your womb as a locked room that everyone else has a key to except you. They knock on it with questions, with prayers, with silence, and you just sit there, wondering whether the room ever existed in the first place. The Queen Dowager begins visiting again. Her smiles are colder this time, her voice more pointed. Patience, she says, is the mark of a good queen, and a fertile one. You want to ask her how she bore sons that never stayed. You want to ask if her womb ever felt like a graveyard dressed in velvet, but instead you bow and say, yes, your grace, and she leaves without waiting for you to rise. Your ladies-in-waiting tighten their smiles the next morning. They help you dress in slightly looser gowns. One slips a sprig of rue into your corset laces. Old remedy. She whispers, you don't remove it. The garden becomes your refuge. Not the royal garden, too many eyes, but the walled herbarium behind the chapel. The plants don't care who you are. They bloom for no one. You walk slowly between rows of lavender, sage, and marigold, letting your fingers skim their heads like a queen blessing her people. One afternoon, you sit among the rosemary and begin to hum a song from childhood. It comes back, not in lyrics, but in rhythm, an old memory stitched into your breath. You hum louder. The gardener, an old woman who speaks rarely and only in fragments, looks up from pruning and nods once. You think she understands. You don't ask her to prove it. Letters arrive from distant provinces asking about your health, your progress, your hopes for an heir. The phrasing is polite, the meaning is not. You begin writing replies that say nothing. I am in good spirits. I am devoted to duty. I am hopeful. Each letter feels like a polite scream muffled in parchment. One night, you try to write the truth. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I was ever asked. But you burn the page before it dries. Your sleep becomes thin and filled with the sound of bells, imaginary ones. You dream of rooms full of people applauding a child who never arrives. You see a crib that rocks on its own. You wake up sweating. You ask your maid to move the small cradle from your chamber. She hesitates, but, milady. You shake your head. Not yet. You whisper. She nods. She doesn't ask again. In public, you are praised for your poise, your grace, your quiet optimism. You are the ideal consort, obedient, radiant, hopeful. You begin to feel like a painting of yourself, flat, polished, admired from a distance, but beneath the surface, your bones ache, not from illness, from restraint, the constant posture, the held breath, the hours of stillness demanded by appearances. You envy the cats that lounge in sunbeams on the stone railings. You once whispered to one, "Do they watch you too?" It blinked slowly and walked away. Rumors start shifting. Now they say your husband is the problem. He was injured in youth. He avoids her chamber. He fears softness. You hear them. You say nothing, because you know how the wind changes. If the story favors him again, the blame will return tenfold. That's how court works. Love is never required. Proof, however, always is. You begin to keep a secret journal, not in a book. That would be dangerous. Instead, you stitch it. One phrase per handkerchief. One sentence tucked behind every embroidered rose. I am not empty. I am not waiting. I am not yours. You hide them under layers of linen. The act of making them is your rebellion. They are not prayers. They are declarations sewn so gently that no one would notice unless they unfolded them completely. And no one will. They are for you. At a formal dinner, a noblewoman leans close and says, "Your glow suits you." Are congratulations in order? You smile, not because it's true, but because it's expected. Later, in the mirror, you look at your reflection and wonder if your skin lies better than your lips do. You touch your stomach, flat, still, as if it, too, is waiting for something. You pull on your robe and walk to the window. The sky's clear, but you feel rain somewhere inside your chest. That night, you bleed. Just a little. Enough to whisper to yourself, "Not this month either." You clean it yourself. You do not call the maid. You sit on the floor and let the cold seep into your spine. You whisper your name again. You add a new word after it this time. Enough. And when the morning comes, you dress in your heaviest gown. You braid your hair tighter than ever. You walk the halls with your chin slightly higher. You do not wait for anyone's gaze. You do not flinch when someone mentions heirs. You just keep walking, like a woman who has decided she no longer owes anyone the softness of hope. The court watches. It always does. But this time, you look back. The moon cycles on, but you don't. The whispers grow louder in their quiet. You can feel them in the way people greet you too warmly, too cheerfully, too deliberately. No one asks you directly. Of course, no one in court ever does. But the glances linger just a bit too long on your hands folded over your stomach. The knowing smiles last a beat too many when you say nothing about your health. And every time you look away, someone is waiting to replace your silence with their conclusion. It's not just your ladies anymore, it's the priest, the steward, the seamstress measuring you for yet another slightly looser bodice. Even the portrait painter seems to hesitate before capturing your profile, as if the slope of your waist might alter in the oil if he dares to presume too much. You begin to wonder if your body is even yours, or if it's been leased to the crown, evaluated monthly like a field that refuses to sprout. They start sending you figs, and honey, and a different midwife with every moon. All of them whisper the same thing: rest more, pray harder, wait longer. You nod. You nod so well now it has become its own language. You dream of escape, but not like in stories. Not on horseback through a forest with wind in your hair and a stolen dagger in your bodice. No, your version of escape is quieter. You dream of a room with a locked door that opens only to the sea, a table with no ink pots, a dress that fits because it wasn't made for showing. In the dream, you pour your own tea. You sit with no one watching. You don't wear a ring. You don't wear expectation. You wake up with a damp pillow and no words to say that don't sound like surrender. One morning, you stare at your reflection so long that you forget which expression is yours. You smile and it looks foreign. You frown and it looks dangerous. You settle into something in between, just neutral. That's always safest. The Queen Dowager summons you. Of course she does. You knew it was coming. She has a voice like parchment crisp, thin, edged with history. She asks no questions. She simply reminds you that the line must continue, that peace is fragile, and you are its vessel, that she, too, endured many years before her son arrived. You will be rewarded, she says, for patience, for piety. You resist the urge to ask her what her reward looked like. Her empty rooms, her silent dinners, her son who speaks more to the huntmaster than to his wife. Instead, you bow. Yes, Your Grace. You've become very good at saying yes to things that feel like no. Your husband returns, briefly. He smells of pine and steel and something else distant. He kisses your forehead. He does not ask if you're well. He does not linger. At dinner, he sits beside you and tells a story about a wolf that got too close to his horse. He laughs at his own telling. You smile politely. Your hands remain in your lap. He doesn't reach for them. Afterward, in your chambers, he undresses quietly and turns his back to you as he lays down. You do the same. You count the breaths between you. You lose track around 70. The next morning, he's gone again. No farewell. Just a servant informing you the prince rode out before dawn. Urgent business, they say. It always is. And then come the rumors. Not about your body, but about his. They drift through the corridors like dust. That he visits the widow near the lake. that he dines privately with the falconer's sister, that he has a preference for those who do not speak your language. You do not cry, you do not accuse, you fold another handkerchief and stitch a single word in the corner invisible. That's what you've become. Not hated, not unloved, just unseen. And sometimes that's worse. Your friends, if you can call them that, offer rehearsed comforts. Men have needs. A queen must endure. He'll come around. You smile. You pretend to believe them. But one day, in the garden, you pull a white rose from the bush so suddenly it pricks your finger. The blood is bright against your glove. You stare at it for a long time before pressing the stain into your sleeve. Later, you wear it to dinner. No one notices. That tells you everything. Historians still argue whether royal marriages were built on partnership or just political necessity. You think it depends on who's writing the record. In yours, partnership means not being punished for breathing too loudly. It means not having to read your own body like a threat report. You've learned how to smile without smiling, how to speak without voice, how to be present without being whole. And now, you begin learning how to disappear without leaving. It's a special kind of magic, one you never asked to master. You begin visiting the kitchens late at night, not for food, but for quiet. The staff clears out by then. The embers are low. You sit on the wooden bench near the hearth and listen to the crackling. It's the only sound that doesn't ask anything from you. Once, the baker's wife sees you there. She says nothing, just nods and leaves a plum tart beside you. The crust is uneven, the sugar not quite dissolved. It tastes perfect, better than any jeweled confection served at court. You write her name in your next handkerchief, just her name, as if recording it protects her. The chapel becomes a place you enter not to pray, but to breathe. You light candles for no one. You do not kneel, you just sit. The priest pretends not to see you. That is a kindness you didn't expect. Once, a child sneaks in behind you and giggles. You turn. She curtsies, too fast, and almost topples over. You help her up. She says, "Are you the princess?" You say, "Sometimes." She runs off. You watch the door swing slowly shut behind her and think, that's the first honest answer I've given in weeks. Then come the healers, imported ones, from the southern provinces, from the northern abbeys. One has bones around his neck. Another reads your palms. They touch you gently, like you are broken glass. They ask questions they don't expect you to answer. You lie on soft cushions and drink infusions and try not to laugh. None of them ask how you feel. They only ask what's missing. You want to say, "Nothing I can give you," but instead, you close your eyes and pretend to sleep. The palace begins to look different, or perhaps you do. The colors dull, the voices grow distant, the corridors stretch. You start walking without purpose just to move. Your maids follow at a distance. You stop speaking to them unless necessary. You begin forgetting what month it is. You forget your own handwriting. One day, you sign a letter and the name feels foreign. You fold it anyway. Your ladies prepare another gown. You ask them to leave the corset loose. One of them frowns. You say, "I need to breathe." She hesitates, then nods. The laces fall softly, forgivingly. It feels like a small revolution. You walk through the hall with your head unburdened. A visiting nobleman whispers something to his friend when you pass. You don't hear it. You don't need to. You've heard every version before. That night, you sit at your vanity and brush your hair 100 times, as your mother once taught you, but you no longer count aloud. You just let the strands fall where they may. You look into the mirror and imagine someone else behind your eyes, someone braver, someone unpromised. The moon is full, the bed is cold, but your hands are warm, and they are still yours. You learn how to smile while they mock you, not just with words, but with glances, with offhand remarks that are too refined to call insults, yet too pointed to miss. You walk into rooms where laughter quiets just a little too slowly, where courtiers shift their gaze as if guilty of something unspoken, and you begin to recognize your own name being used like a punchline, a foreign name, an empty cradle, a painted smile. She's graceful, even for her condition. Someone says, and you know exactly what they mean. The court jester delivers a riddle at dinner. What grows pale with praise, fades with silence, and returns monthly with tears. The room laughs. You lower your eyes. You take a sip of wine. You chew your bread slowly. You learn to be the echo of dignity. Historians still argue whether queens were mocked behind their backs or to their faces, whether satire served as pressure valve or poison. You have no need to argue. You have lived the answer. The court doesn't need permission to turn your delay into entertainment. It just needs boredom and wine. You begin writing notes you never send, letters to no one, to yourself. Dear me, today they made me into a joke and I still said thank you. Dear me, I smiled when I wanted to scream. Dear me, I survived the feast again. You hide them in the spine of a hollow book, one that used to be a missile but now holds only your silence, folded carefully. You press a dried violet into one of the pages and write beside it, they think stillness is consent. You do not correct them. You do not argue with a room that has already decided what you are. One morning, your maid brings news wrapped in softness. The Duchess has given birth to a son. The bells ring. The court dresses in brighter silks. A feast is declared in celebration. You are expected to attend. You do. You wear yellow. You smile. You offer blessings. You hold the infant briefly in your arms. His weight unfamiliar. His breath fast and warm against your chest. Someone whispers, "You'll have one soon." You hand the child back. You leave the hall early. You do not cry until the door closes behind you. The tears come hot and fast, as if they've been waiting for a moment without witnesses. Your mother writes again. Her letter is lined with platitudes. You are strong. You are blessed. You must not let the court unsettle you. You stare at her words and think of how she never prepared you for this, how she spoke so much about duty and so little about loneliness. You take out one of your unsent notes and press it beneath hers. Dear me, I miss the sound of someone meaning my name. At a winter gathering, the poet recites verses meant to honor your beauty, but each stanza ends with a cruel little twist, fair and firm, a waiting womb, eyes like stars, longing for a moon. You laugh at the right moments. You even clap. You have become so good at applause you hardly notice when your hands begin to ache. That night, you remove your ring slowly, as though freeing yourself from tiny golden prisons. One by one, you place them in a bowl and stare at them. You resist the urge to drop it, to hear something shatter. You begin walking alone again, further now, past the chapel, past the herb garden, into the lower courtyards where the stone walls are cracked, and the vines grow with less permission. A maid follows from a distance. You pretend not to see her. The wind bites your cheeks, and you welcome it. It feels honest. You stop under an archway and run your fingers over the stone. Someone once carved initials here, long forgotten. You add your own, invisible, with the edge of your nail. No one will see, but you will know it's there. You write just 2 letters Y and O. You don't finish the rest. A dog follows you once. Stray and limping, you feed it scraps for 3 days before the guards chase it off. Disease, they say. Unfitting. You say nothing. That night, you sew a piece of fur into the hem of your cloak. Not much. Just enough to remember softness. You name the piece Mercy in your mind. You never speak it aloud. One of your ladies begins to show signs of pregnancy. She glows. Literally glows. Her skin softens. Her laughter returns. You hug her, and she weeps into your shoulder. I'm sorry, she says. You shush her gently, but the sound catches in your throat. You want to be angry. You want to be happy. You want to feel anything purely again, but all you feel is the weight of pretending. That evening, you pick up your embroidery and stitch one word in golden thread into a piece of linen enough. You fold it and place it beside your other hidden works. You light a candle. You let it burn. Your husband returns again. He says nothing about your absence at the last council gathering. He doesn't ask about the feast, or the poet, or the child. He looks tired. You wonder if he's also being watched. If he's also being whispered about, you almost ask. But the silence between you has become sacred in its own bitter way. You eat together. You say little. Before bed, he speaks. I'm sorry this is hard for you. It's the first real sentence he's offered in months. You reply, it's not just hard. It's constant. He nods. You don't look at each other, but for a moment, it feels like something cracked open, then shut again. The next day, you receive a visitor from your homeland. A cousin, young, newly betrothed. She stares at you with bright eyes and reverence. You're so poised, she says, so elegant. You offer her tea. You do not tell her what it costs to wear elegance like armor. You don't warn her about the way silence grows teeth. She asks what your days are like. You say, busy. She nods, like that's the most noble answer in the world. Before she leaves, she embraces you tightly. I hope I become like you. You smile. You will. You whisper. And then you pray she won't. That night, in the bath, you sink beneath the water and stay there longer than usual. The candles flicker above. Your breath slows. You let the heat numb your limbs. When you finally surface, the world feels dimmer, softer, like it's preparing you for something. You wrap yourself in towels and write another note. Dear me, if they laugh, let them. You are not their punchline. You are the silence that follows it. You place the note beside your others. You look at them all, dozens now, folded into clean linen, hidden under perfumes and jewelry and the weight of being what you were told to be. You run your hand over the pile, then you blow out the candle, and sleep. You smile while they mock you, but you no longer smile for them. You smile because they never knew who was watching back. There is no curtain call in court life, no moment when the performance ends and someone says, well done, you can rest now. Instead, the days blend into one another like the threads of your gowns intricately stitched. Impossible to separate, you are always on stage. Even when you're asleep, you're on display. Your dreams feel observed. Your sighs feel overheard. When you kneel at the altar, you know someone is counting how long you linger. When you walk through the garden, you feel eyes behind shutters. When you cry, and you do cry now, it's never in full, only in measured drops. Your tears must be symmetrical, ladylike, ideally invisible. At court, vulnerability isn't scandalous, it's inefficient. Even grief has to be well-tailored. You've become so used to being watched that sometimes, when no one is around, you still hold your body like a sculpture, straight spine, soft eyes, folded hands. You've learned that even solitude requires grace. Historians still argue whether queens were prisoners of tradition or masters of illusion. You no longer wonder. You know now that both can be true. You can be the cage bird and the one who sings anyway. You stop asking questions, not because you've run out, but because you've learned which ones echo, which ones come back without answers, or worse, come back softened into something digestible and useless. You asked once why the Queen Dowager never remarried. The response was, she found her purpose elsewhere. You asked once if your voice could be heard in council. The answer was, of course, if it's appropriate. You begin to categorize replies by their evasiveness. You collect them in your mind like rare insects, carefully pinned and labeled, polite dismissal, silent reassurance, ceremonial encouragement. You begin to use them yourself. When someone asks how you are, you say, grateful. When they ask if you're hopeful, you say, always. And when they ask if you're happy, you say nothing. You just smile. That's safer. The act of being watched becomes so constant that one day, when you step into a room and find it empty, you freeze. You stand there for a full minute, blinking at the absence of witnesses, no maids, no pages, no attendants, just a fireplace, flickering softly, and a single chair waiting in the corner like a forgotten invitation. You take a breath. You sit. For the first time in weeks, you slouch. You rest your elbows on your knees. You drop your chin into your palms. You let your face collapse. And then, just to see what it feels like, you whisper your most dangerous truth. I'm so tired of pretending. The words are small, nearly shapeless. But when you say them aloud, they become a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying in silence. The door creaks open. A maid enters. She pauses, startled. You straighten instinctively. You rise, brush invisible dust from your skirt, restore the expression you've worn for so long. It should have its own title. Is there something, my lady? She asks. Nothing. You say, voice calm, only a draft. She nods and curtsies. She leaves. You sit down again. This time, you don't slouch. The moment is gone, but you remember it. And in this palace, remembering is an act of survival. The Queen Dowager begins bringing you small gifts, not for affection, never affection, but as reminders. A prayer book bound in gold, a pair of gloves stitched with lilies, a mirror, round and framed in mother of pearl, the kind that shows your face with soft cruelty, to remind you of your role, she says. You thank her? You don't say that you've stopped looking at yourself in mirrors unless you must. You've memorized your own reflection already, and there's nothing new to find. You keep the gifts, store them in a drawer you never open. They join the collection, the comb, the brooch, the note with, for comfort and fertility. You keep them like relics. Someday, perhaps, a historian will unearth them and wonder what you thought when you held them. You hope they imagined correctly, that you didn't feel flattered, you felt curated. You attend a masquerade. It's mandatory. The theme is winter's silence. You wear a mask of white silk and feathers. Everyone around you is disguised, their voices muffled by laughter and wine and music. For a moment, you think maybe this is what freedom feels like. You dance with a man whose name you don't hear. His hands are warm. He says you move like a secret. You laugh a real laugh, and it startles you. You haven't heard yourself sound like that in months. You say nothing more. You dance 2 more songs. You leave without removing your mask. When you return to your room, you hang it on your mirror. You sleep more soundly that night than you have in weeks. Then the performance resumes. The next morning, you wake to a new set of rumors. That you're in love with a foreign prince. That you've been seen weeping near the chapel. That your health is declining. All untrue. All believable. You wonder if anyone ever needs you to be real. Or if your image is enough. You wonder if they'd be satisfied with a statue, if they could place you in the hall and ask nothing more than silence and occasional smiling. You fantasize about it. You wonder if stone gets tired. You begin keeping to the western wing more often. Fewer people pass there. The windows are taller. The air feels slower. One room has a ceiling painted with constellations, a sky that never changes. You visit it daily. You lie on the cold floor and stare upward. Sometimes, when you're brave, you talk to the ceiling like it listens. What would you do? You whisper. If you were promised to a silence that never ends, the stars do not answer, but they stay. That counts for something. Your husband returns again, briefly. This time he brings a foreign diplomat. You're told to dine with them. You do. You smile at the right moments. You pour wine with grace. The diplomat compliments your accent. You thank him. You feel your husband watching you with something close to interest, but not quite. That night, he does not sleep beside you. He sends word that he's unwell. You do not inquire further. In the morning, you find a new envelope tucked among your books. No seal, no signature. Inside, a single phrase, you are more than they pretend you are. No one claims it. No one mentions it. You hide it among your stitched handkerchiefs. You whisper it to yourself before sleep. The guards begin bowing lower when you pass. The younger maids hold your gaze longer than they should. The court poet writes a sonnet that ends with a line. Her silence is not submission, but storm asleep. You pretend not to hear it, but it follows you. That week, you speak only when necessary. You nod, you walk, you smile. But inside, you are moving. You're beginning to stretch again. Not visibly. Not in a way that would concern anyone, but enough. You begin reading older texts, queens who reigned without husbands, women who led armies in silence, matrons who changed kingdoms by tending to seeds. You begin planning your own garden not for flowers, but for herbs, strong ones, bitter ones, necessary ones. You realize then the curtain never drops, but maybe you can step off the stage anyway. Even if they never notice, even if they keep applauding, you will be gone, and they'll be clapping for a ghost. Your maid begins brushing your hair slower now, as though she knows you've grown weary of everything fast and sharp. You sit with your hands in your lap, eyes unfocused, as the comb passes through like a soft metronome keeping time in a world that no longer runs on clocks. She hums a tune, familiar but unnamed. You don't ask what it is. You're learning that some melodies are only for those who've survived them. She asks gently if you'd like your hair braided or loose today. You say loose, and the word feels like an exhale. You catch your own reflection and you don't flinch this time. There you are, still framed in lace and expectation, but your eyes are beginning to belong to you again. You almost smile, almost. Then she speaks again. You look more rested lately, and you nod. Not because it's true, but because it might be someday. That's what you've come to crave. Not escape, not revenge, but the slow, steady return of your own reflection. Your maid becomes more than a servant. She becomes your witness. The one person who sees you before the paint, before the posture, before the stage. She has no rank, no power, no reason to protect you beyond her own private code. But still, she plets your hair with tenderness. She brings you tea she knows you like, not the one the physicians recommend. She doesn't flinch when you sigh. And sometimes, when your hand trembles slightly while reaching for a comb or a quill, she steadies it with her own and says nothing. You've begun to think of her as a mirror that reflects only what you wish to remember. Historians still debate whether royal women had intimate friendships across class divides, or whether proximity was always performance. You've lived the answer. The truth is quieter than theory. The truth is a girl with calloused hands wrapping your fingers in a warm cloth and saying, "You don't have to be strong right now. There's a rhythm to your mornings now." She opens the windows before you speak. She folds your nightgown as if tucking in a secret. She lays out 2 dresses, one formal, one soft, and waits for you to decide. That moment of choice, small as it is, becomes your breath. You choose the soft one more often. You no longer apologize for it. When others ask why you're not dressed in state attire, you say, "I've already served the throne before breakfast." They laugh, and that's enough. You've found power in the deflection. You wield charm like a sheath, not a sword. Sometimes, after your hair is pinned, you speak with her, not often, not deeply, but enough to remind yourself that language can still be shared without manipulation. You ask about her family. She tells you about a sister who once caught a trout with her bare hands and refused to let it go, even when it flapped against her face. You laugh, not politely, not quietly. You laugh with teeth. It echoes through the chamber like a crack in the plaster. She doesn't hush you. She just smiles. The next day, you ask again. She tells you about her mother's hands. You memorize the details. You're learning that intimacy doesn't require scandal. It just needs someone to hold the silence with you and not fill it with questions. One morning, she brings a box. Small, wooden, nondescript. "My mother gave me this when I came into service," she says. "She told me to keep something in it that's mine. Always." You blink. She pushes it toward you. "Would you like one too?" You nod. Later that evening, she returns with another box, identical, save for a carved star on the lid. "I thought maybe you'd need somewhere to keep the things you can't say out loud." You run your fingers over the grain. You say thank you. You don't open it in front of her. Some gifts are too sacred for witnesses. That night, you fold one of your stitched handkerchiefs, one of the bolder ones. It says, "I am not your invention." You place it inside the box, then another. She wore her silence like velvet, but it's scratched. You tuck it beneath. You don't close the lid. You let it sit open beside your bed, as if daring someone to ask. No one does. She begins slipping herbs into your bath. You notice the difference. The scent of marjoram. The way your limbs feel less like performance and more like presence. "For dreaming," she says when you ask. Not of escape, just of stillness. You whisper, "That's all I want now." She doesn't say, "You deserve more." She just nods. That's how you know she understands. The two of you begin communicating without speaking. When she leaves a pomegranate on your tray, you know it's a reminder, sweetness with seeds. When she plets your hair with an extra loop, you know it means today might require patience. When she buttons your dress too slowly, you know it means take your time. These small signs become your grammar, your secret language in a palace that mistranslates everything you say. One day, a lady of higher rank catches the maid adjusting your shawl. You're very attached to her, she says, too sweetly. You smile. She's the only person here who hasn't lied to me. The lady raises her brows, says nothing. Later, your maid hesitates when entering your chamber. You ask her what's wrong. She says, they're watching. You say, let them. She brushes your hair more slowly that night. The silence between you is heavier, but not frightened, just aware. At a feast, you're seated beside a visiting dignitary. He speaks too much, asks too little. He tells you how admired you are, how graceful, how elegant. You nod, you smile. You sip your wine and wonder if he's practiced this conversation on every queen he's ever met. Afterward, back in your chamber, your maid says, I saw how you smiled. You say, you always do. She replies, and I always will. You begin leaving notes for her, tucked into folds of linen. Nothing bold, just small lines. Thank you for seeing me. The tea was perfect. Your hands remind me that I am still real. She never mentions them aloud, but you find replies. A sprig of lavender in your sleeve, a ribbon folded into a flower. Once, a note in perfect script. You are the only reason I stay. One evening, during a storm, the windows shake. The thunder echoes like cannons. You light a candle, but it wavers. You call for her not out of fear, but out of longing. She arrives already holding a blanket. You both sit on the floor by the hearth, watching the lightning dance across the ceiling. Do you ever wish you had run away, you ask. She nods, then says, but then I wouldn't have met you. You both laugh, quietly, like children hiding from their own shadows. That night, you don't dream of escape. You dream of a room with no titles, just two women, sitting by a fire, calling each other by names the world never gave them. She becomes your mirror, not the glass one, the living one. She tells you when you've worn the same grief too many days. She tells you when you've smiled too hard. She tells you, without words, when it's safe to rest your head in her lap and let the palace go mute for just a while. You do, often. And yet, the court says nothing. They know, but they say nothing, because they don't know what to call a queen who finds solace not in a king, not in a crown, but in the hands of a girl with no lineage and no claim. And silence, as you have learned, is its own protection. She brushes your hair each morning. You let her, and in that, you are finally free. You begin to walk the halls differently now, not like someone being followed, but like someone being remembered. The guards no longer glance nervously when you pass. They nod. The courtiers still speak in lowered voices, but now the hush sounds less like judgment and more like reverence. It's not that you've become feared. You've become understood, even if only in fragments. You were the queen who didn't cry when the cradle remained empty. The queen who didn't fall when the whispers multiplied. The queen who didn't shout when her voice was taken, who simply kept breathing until breath became statement. You've outlasted their expectations. And that, in a palace built on performance, is a kind of miracle. You notice the shifts, the way the bishop bows lower, the way the steward no longer double-checks your accounts. Even the queen dowager, when she visits, watches you for longer stretches, as though searching for the fault line that never cracked. You give her nothing. You pour her tea. You ask about her knees. She tells you they ache in the cold. You nod sympathetically. You smile with the grace of someone who could ruin a legacy and chooses not to. You're no longer expected to attend every function, yet now you choose to attend some, not for them but for yourself. You pick your appearances like you pick herbs carefully, sparingly, with intention. You wear softer colors, but your eyes hold steel. At one banquet, a visiting prince comments on your serene composure. You lift your glass and say, "It takes time to become quiet." He laughs, as if it's a jest, but your voice does not rise. That's when he realizes you meant it. That's when he turns away, not in insult, but in awe. You've become the kind of woman who makes men look twice and say nothing. Your husband remains present. That is the word for it now. He doesn't apologize again, and you don't request it. He sits beside you more often, listens more carefully. Sometimes he brings you books. Once he brought you a dog, a small, wiry creature with alert ears and a nervous tail. You named it Ash. When asked why, you said, because it survives where the fire failed. Ash follows you through the corridors, curling at your feet during council meetings, snoring gently beside your writing desk. The court begins whispering not about your barrenness, but about your calm. They say you've grown peaceful. You don't correct them. Peace is not what you have. What you have is clarity. Peace is what others feel when they no longer know how to contain you. You visit the nursery again. This time, the doors are open. Inside, the children play loudly, without protocol or pretense. You sit among them, and they don't pause. They don't curtsy or bow. One climbs into your lap, sticky-fingered and curious. You let her. Her name is Anselma. She asks if you are someone important. You say, not to everyone. She nods like that makes sense. She points to your hand. Why do you wear that ring? You look at it. You say, because it reminds me I am not empty. She tilts her head. Are you full then? You smile. Some days. She accepts the answer and runs off. The nursemaid thanks you. You thank her back. You walk home slowly, your sleeves damp with apple juice and innocence. That night, you write the child's name in your journal and press her laughter between the pages like a petal. The next morning, the sky is pink with frost. You wake before the bells. You walk to the garden barefoot. Your maids protest. You wave them off. The grass is cold, but you do not flinch. You stand beneath the arbor, still barren this time of year, and raise your face to the sky. You breathe. Nothing happens, and that is the miracle. No news, no letters, no announcements, just a morning where no one demands your body, your air, your obedience, your performance. You return to your chambers with pink cheeks and wet feet. Your maid wraps you in towels. You thank her. She says nothing, but her hands are gentle. You realize she's new, but her quiet reminds you of the girl who once left behind a ribbon. You continue your correspondence, now with increasing precision. You're writing not just to maintain appearances, but to shape them. You request records from the estate managers, not because anyone asked you to, but because you've learned how much goes missing when no one looks. You discover a discrepancy in the grain reports. You ask questions, quietly, calmly. They answer. Eventually, you correct it. No one applauds. But the next month, the records come cleaner. You see your name noted in the margin of one. Her Highness reviewed. You smile, not from pride, from recognition. Your handkerchief box is full now. You don't add to it as often, not because you've run out of things to say, but because you've begun to say them elsewhere. You wear them instead, in the way you stand, in the way you listen, in the way you no longer fold when faced with silence. The court doesn't know the script anymore. You rewrote it without telling them. A lady remarks at dinner, you've become mysterious. You say, I've become. She leaves it at that. One night, your husband knocks. Not enters knocks. You open the door. He doesn't step in. He simply says, would you walk with me? You nod. You both walk through the quiet halls, past the chapel, past the council chambers, past the nursery. He says, I wanted to ask how you are. You reply, late, but asking, he smiles. It's tired, human. He says, you're not the girl I married. You say, no. He pauses. You're stronger. You answer, I had to become someone I could live with. He doesn't ask forgiveness. You do not offer it. You part at the stairwell. He bows slightly. You continue walking. You return to your chamber and open your box for the first time in weeks. You read one line, not every crown is earned in public. You close the lid. You pet Ash. You sleep without dreams. The court continues, as it must, but something has shifted. You're no longer the promise of a future. You are the memory of endurance. You are the lesson no one wrote, but everyone now cites. You are the childless queen who did not vanish, the bride who did not break, the woman who stopped being a vessel and became a voice. You don't need monuments. You don't need heirs. You are the echo that lingers when the halls fall quiet. You are the reason the young girls now dare to ask different questions. You are the new answer. And someday, when history forgets your silence, it will remember your stillness. Because you didn't fade. You redefine the outline they left you. You rise before the sun now, not because you must, but because you choose the quiet over the clamor. The palace still sleeps when you dress in wool and linen instead of silk. You light the candle yourself. No servants needed. The flame flickers steadily, as if it remembers your earliest prayers, the ones whispered through gritted teeth. You don't pray aloud anymore. You listen, to the scrape of wood as the floor settles, to the crows beyond the window, to the breath of ash curled in a circle at your feet. The dog is older now, like you, calmer, no longer leaps, but leans. Some days, the ache in your fingers suggests time is no longer far behind, but you do not fear it. You've lived long enough to see yourself become someone no record can fully explain. The historians will say you were dutiful, that you fulfilled the role. They will forget your late walks in the cloisters, your letters that never reached their destinations, your refusal to name certain things as regret. They'll gloss over your pauses the way you refused to answer until you had found the question. But that's fine. What survives is not always what was loudest. Sometimes, what lasts is what was most carefully held. A new girl arrives to serve in the royal household. She's barely older than you were, once. Her eyes dart around like trapped birds. She curtsies clumsily, offers your morning tray with hands that shake. You tell her to sit. She stares at you like it's a trick. You say again, sit. She does. You ask her name. She whispers, Leora. You nod. You say, in Hebrew, that means light. She looks startled, then smiles. She tells you she didn't know. You sip your tea. You ask if she's homesick. She doesn't answer. You let the silence do the holding. Before she leaves, you press a folded cloth into her palm. A stitched phrase you're allowed to stay soft. She weeps, quietly, bows, and walks straighter as she leaves. You've begun teaching the girls in the kitchens to read, not formally, just stories. At first, then notes, then prayers, then laws. You don't tell the bishop. You don't ask permission. You gather them under the guise of embroidery. You stitch while you speak of treaties. You talk about empresses who ruled during regencies. You mention Catherine of Siena, who advised popes. You name names no one taught them. They listen. They begin to ask. They begin to write. Not one of them thanks you aloud, but one leaves a daisy in your chair each morning. You don't move it. It becomes part of the ritual, a wordless agreement between women. One evening, while walking past the old nursery, you stop. The windows are open. You hear a lullaby being hummed, not sung, just hummed low, like a secret. You lean in. The melody is one your own mother used to hum, before palaces, before promises, before titles. Your throat tightens, but you don't cry. You smile. You whisper. You got out, didn't you? And you imagine her nodding, wherever she is. You return to your room and open the carved wooden box. The silk inside is faded now, the thread pulled in places. You lift the handkerchiefs, one by one, like turning pages in a book only you can read. So many voices, your own, over and over, echoing through the folds of time. Some stitched in shaky hands, others with fierce, angular lines. One simply says, I made it through the night. You hold that one longest. Then, you reach for a fresh cloth. You thread the needle, and in steady, practiced motion, you sew the final phrase I lived without the life they promised me, and I was still whole. You fold it carefully and place it on top. The next morning, you walk to the tower chamber where the royal archivist sits. He's hunched over scrolls, muttering about dates. He barely notices you until your shadow touches the table. Then he stumbles to his feet, bowing. You wave him down. You hand him a parcel. For the women who will never be named, you say. May they find pieces of themselves in the margins? He unwraps it, sees the handkerchiefs, looks puzzled. What shall I do with them? He asks. You smile. Let them be forgotten properly. Not erased, just honored, without spectacle. He nods, still confused, but he places them gently in a cedar drawer. You turn to leave. Behind you, he whispers, Thank you, Your Majesty. You do not respond, not out of pride, out of peace. In the courtyard, the trees are just beginning to bud. Spring arriving without permission, you breathe in the new air. It smells of mud, sun, and slow defiance. You run your fingers along the stone wall. The carvings there are older than your name, your reign, your lineage. But you exist here too, in the worn staircases, the waxy candelabras, the velvet chair with a split seam. You have not been a queen in the way they imagined. You have been something quieter, but not smaller. The court still writes poems about wars and suns. They do not know how to sing about the women who wait, who sew, who walk barefoot into the frost and never flinch. But that's fine. Your story will be told in the hands of girls who grow up strong in the soft places, in the breath of the new maids who no longer fear the silence, in the smile of the nurse who teaches not just feeding, but self-worth, in the echo of your footsteps down corridors that no longer shrink at your presence. You end each evening now the same way. A single candle, a single word, one you say aloud just before sleep. Sometimes it's grace, sometimes endure, sometimes again. Tonight, it is enough. You blow out the flame. You do not wait for the darkness to reassure you. You have become the reassurance. And somewhere, across the kingdom, another girl is promised. Another vow is spoken over her like a prophecy. Another life plotted before she's even seen her second spring. But maybe she will find a scrap of cloth, or a quiet woman in gray, or the absence of command where once there was pressure. Maybe she will ask, can I be more? Maybe she will be told yes. And maybe, when the crown weighs too heavily, she will know how to carry it without bending. Because once you did, and you left no heirs, but you left a trail.